This is number seven podcast.
Number 7 podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the number 7 podcast channel. We're going to be talking about 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's a really complex book. There's a lot going on, but we're going to try to break it down for you. So the story starts with Colonel Aureliano Buendia. He's about to be executed by a firing squad. But as he's standing there, he starts thinking back to his childhood. Specifically, he remembers the founding of Macondo, which is this mythical town that's kind of at the center of the story. So to understand how Macondo came to be, we have to go back to the beginning and talk about Jose Arcadio Buendia, who is Aureliano's father. Jose Arcadio is a very curious guy. He's obsessed with alchemy and new inventions, and he's always looking for ways to push the boundaries of knowledge. So one day, this group of gypsies comes to town. They're led by this mysterious figure named Marquez, and they bring with them all these amazing things like magnets and telescopes and flying carpets. Jose Arcadio is immediately fascinated by all this. He sees these gypsies as a source of knowledge and wonder, and he's particularly drawn to Marquez,
who seems to have this kind of mystical wisdom. But Jose Arcadio isn't just a dreamer. He's also a man of action. He has this vision of creating a utopia, a perfect society free from the constraints of the outside world. And he believes that Macondo is the place to do it. So he gathers up a group of people, including his wife Ursula, and they set off into the wilderness to find a place to build their new town. Their journey is really difficult. They have to cross mountains and jungles and swamps, and they face all sorts of dangers along the way. But they eventually find a spot by a river, and they decide to settle there. And that's how Macondo was born. Now, life in Macondo is anything but ordinary. Right from the start, the town is marked by strange events and magical occurrences. For example, one of the first things that happens is that a plague of insomnia sweeps through the town. People can't sleep, and they start to lose their memories. It gets so bad that they forget the names of even the most common objects. So Jose Arcadio comes up with this system where he labels everything in town with its name so people can remember what things are. But even that doesn't really work.
The insomnia plague just keeps getting worse, and it starts to have this really strange effect on people's minds. It's almost like they're losing their sense of reality, like the line between what's real and what's not is starting to blur. And on top of all of that, the Buendia family is dealing with their own issues. Jose Arcadio and Ursula are cousins, and they're afraid that their children will be born with pigtails because of this family curse. And to make matters even worse, Jose Arcadio is haunted by the ghost of Prudencio Aguilar, a man that he killed in a duel many years ago. So they're living with this constant fear that their past sins are going to come back to haunt them. And it's really weighing on them, so they decide to move to officially establish Macondo. In a new location, they're hoping that a fresh start will help them escape the shadows of the past. But as we'll see, the past has a way of catching up with you, no matter how hard you try to run from it. Now as Macondo grows, so does the Buendia family. They have 2 children, Aureliano and Amaranta. Aureliano is a solitary and introspective boy, kind of like his father in some ways, and Amaranta is a beautiful and headstrong girl
Who's destined for a lot of heartbreak. And then there's Rebecca, who's adopted into the family. Rebecca's this kind of mysterious figure. She comes from a different town. And she has this strange habit of eating dirt, which is kind of a symbol of her connection to the earth. And her outsider status, Rebecca's arrival at Macondo, adds a whole new layer of complexity to the family dynamics. And then things start to get really interesting. When Don Apolinar Mascote arrives in town, he's the first magistrate of Macondo, and he represents the arrival of the outside world. Jose Arcadio Buendia is really resistant to Mascote's authority. He sees him as a threat to the independence of Macondo, and he refuses to cooperate with him. This conflict between Jose Arcadio and Mascote is kind of a microcosm of the larger conflict. It's brewing between tradition and modernity, between the old ways of doing things, and the new forces that are shaping the world. As the town evolves, so do the lives of the Buendias. Aureliano falls deeply in love with Remedios, who's the youngest daughter of Don Apolinar Mascote. But their love is forbidden because of their family's feud. And Remedios is still just a child.
So their relationship is this kind of strange and beautiful thing. It's full of both tenderness and melancholy. Meanwhile, Amaranta is falling for Pietro Crespi, a handsome and talented musician who comes to Macondo to install a pianola. But Pietro is also in love with Rebecca, so this creates a love triangle that's going to have some pretty devastating consequences. And just as love and family ties are starting to tighten, the winds of political change are sweeping through the nation and casting a shadow over the once peaceful Macondo. The liberal and conservative parties are at war, and Macondo is caught in the middle. Aureliano, who's always been kind of apolitical, starts to get drawn into the conflict. He sees the injustice and corruption of the conservative government, and he decides to join the liberal rebels. This decision is going to change his life forever.
And it's going to have a profound impact on the fate of Macondo. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. Make sure to come back for part 2, where we'll dive deeper into the world of 100 Years of Solitude and explore the themes of love, war, family, and fate. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so last time we left off with Aureliano joining the rebels.
Right.
Yeah, he really transforms. He becomes this like legendary figure, Colonel Aureliano Buendia. But war is a tough business. And it really changes him. Like, he sees a lot of violence, a lot of death, and it starts to wear on him. He even starts to question, like, what's the point of it all? What am I fighting for? But he keeps going. He leads the rebels in all these battles, and he becomes famous all across the country. Meanwhile, back in Macondo, things are kind of falling apart. Aureliano's brother, Arcadio, he takes over as the leader, but he's not really cut out for it. He becomes a tyrant, starts making all these crazy rules, and he gets really paranoid, thinks everyone's out to get him, so things are pretty chaotic in Macondo, while Aureliano is off fighting the war. But even with all that going on, there's still love in the air. Aureliano is still in love with Remedios, and they actually do end up getting married. But it doesn't last long. Remedios dies really young, which is like a huge blow to Aureliano. He's completely devastated. And it kind of reinforces this feeling he has, that everything is meaningless.
Like all this fighting, all this suffering, what's it all for? And then there's Amaranta, remember her? She's still in love with Pietro Crespi, but he's not interested in her. He's actually in love with Rebecca, which just makes Amaranta even more bitter and resentful. So there's a whole mess, this love triangle, and it ends tragically, with Pietro killing himself after being rejected by both women. So yeah, a lot of heartbreak in this part of the story. But eventually the war does end. Aureliano gets tired of fighting, he signs a peace treaty, and he comes back to Macondo. But he's a changed man. The war has really taken its toll on him. He's withdrawn, depressed. He's basically a shell of his former self. And Macondo has changed too. It's not the same town it used to be. The war has brought a lot of violence and destruction. And the Banana Company has arrived, which is going to have a huge impact on the town. But we'll get to that later. For now, we're going to shift our focus to the next generation of Buendias, specifically Aureliano II, who's Aureliano's nephew. Now, Aureliano II is a very different guy from his uncle. He's more outgoing, more charismatic, and he loves to party. He's also a bit of a womanizer.
He has this really passionate affair with a woman named Petrocotes, who becomes his mistress. And their relationship is actually really important because it kind of brings a period of prosperity to Macondo. Like, there's this weird thing that happens where gold coins start appearing in their house, like out of nowhere. And Aureliano II uses this newfound wealth to throw these lavish parties and basically live life to the fullest. But of course, it can't last forever, this period of abundance. And eventually things start to go downhill, the money runs out, the parties stop, and Aureliano II starts to feel the weight of his responsibilities. He's also married to a woman named Fernanda del Carpio, who's very different from Petrocotes. Fernanda is more traditional, more concerned with appearances, and she's not too happy about Aureliano II's infidelity. So there's a lot of tension in their marriage, and it's only going to get worse as the story goes on. Now, while all this is happening, Aureliano II's twin brother, Jose Arcadio II, he's kind of going in a different direction. He's more interested in politics and social justice. He sees the way that the Banana Company
is exploiting the workers, and he wants to do something about it. So he gets involved in the labor movement, and he tries to organize the workers to fight for their rights, which is a really dangerous thing to do, especially in a place like Macondo, where the Banana Company has a lot of power and the government's corrupt. But Jose Arcadio II is determined to make a difference, even if it means risking his own life. So Jose Arcadio II, right, he's trying to help the workers. And it all kind of comes to a head with this big strike. Things get really tense. In the Banana Company, well, they call in the army, to break up the strike. And it turns into a massacre, like a really horrific event. Thousands of workers are killed, and Jose Arcadio II, he sees it all. He witnesses the whole thing. And it just completely breaks him. Like, he's traumatized. He can't shake the images, the violence, the death. It just haunts him. And he kind of retreats into himself, becomes recluse, doesn't really talk to anyone. And then on top of that, it starts raining. Like, it rains for years, nonstop. And it's like this symbol of the decay, the stagnation that's happening in Macondo. Like, the town is literally drowning.
And the Buendia family, they're not doing so great either. Ursula, she's getting older, she's losing her sight, but she's still this strong presence. In the family, she kind of sees everything. Even though she's blind, she understands the family's history, their patterns, their fate. But she can't really do anything to change it. And Fernanda Diaz, well, she's still trying to hold on to her social status, her traditions. But it's all slipping away. The family's falling apart. Macondo's falling apart. And she's kind of powerless to stop it. And Aureliano II, he lost his spark. He's not the life of the party anymore. He's kind of just going through the motions, thinking about the past, about Petrocult, about the good old days, when everything was so much simpler. But those days are gone, and he knows it. So yeah, things are pretty bleak at this point in the story. But then a new generation comes along, and there's a glimmer of hope. Aureliano Babylonia, he's the last male heir of the Buendia line, and he's kind of obsessed with these mysterious parchments that were left behind by Melquiades. Remember him, the gypsy leader. Well, it turns out that these parchments contain the entire history of the Buendia family.
It's all written down there. Every birth, every death, every triumph, every tragedy. And Aureliano Babylonia, he spends years trying to decipher them, to understand his family's destiny. And then Amaranta Ursula shows up. She's Aureliano Babylonia's aunt. And she's just come back from Europe. She's full of life, full of energy. She kind of shakes things up in the Buendia household. But things get complicated because they fall in love. Aureliano Babylonia and Amaranta Ursula. And it's a forbidden love. They're aunt and nephew, but they can't help themselves. Their passion is too strong. And they end up having a child together. But the child is born with a pig's tail. It fulfills the prophecy that's been hanging over the Buendia family for generations. It's a sign that the family's time is up, that their lineage is coming to an end. At the same time, Aureliano Babylonia finally deciphers the last of Melquiades' parchments, and he realizes that everything that's happened to his family was preordained, was all written down in those parchments from the beginning. And just as he finishes reading, a huge whirlwind sweeps through Macondo and destroys the town.
Like it's completely wiped off the map. The Buendia family, their house, everything, it's all gone. And that's the end of 100 years of solitude. It's a pretty intense book, but it's also really beautiful and thought-provoking. So if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. And if you have read it, maybe it's time for a reread, because there's always something new to discover in this amazing book. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Number 7 podcast channel. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what other books you'd like us to cover. Until next time, happy reading.